Hello and welcome back to What Just Happened. I'm Samuel McVicar. Today we're going to review the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war and the aftermath of a recent strike by Russia using an intermediate ballistic missile. So Russia has launched a new wave of strikes across Ukraine, targeting energy facilities, drone production sites around Kyiv, the capital city, and also hitting infrastructure in the western city of Lviv. Now, Moscow has stated the strike in Lviv was from an intermediate ballistic missile known as an Oreshnik. Fun fact, Oreshnik means a hazel tree in Russian, the name apparently coming from the shape that the warheads make when deployed. So to cover this, joining me today from the Eurasia desk is intelligence analyst Karan Vassil. How's it going, Karan?
Hey Sam, I'm doing fine. All good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So let's talk about this recent Oreshnik missile. So what's so significant about this strike in Lviv and the use of this particular type of missile?
So yeah, this is the strike, just for context, took place on the 9th of January, and this is the second known time that Russia has been using its Oreshnik intermediate range ballistic missile, which is also nuclear capable. But the Oreshnik is part of Russia's most latest missiles, and it is estimated to have a range around, let's say, 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers. Still unclear, but it is definitely showcased, at least by Russian authorities, and one of the most lethal and capabilities in terms of missiles. So when the attack took place, the Russian Ministry of Defense clearly stated that first it targeted a facility that was involved in the repair of military aviation in Ukraine, located in near Lviv, which is in western Ukraine, and located really not too far from the border with Poland, which is also a NATO member state. And I'll develop a little bit more on this a little bit later. And Russian authorities claimed that this attack, this launch of the Oreshnik missile, was a response to an alleged Ukrainian drone attack against one of Russia's presidential residence in Novgorod Oblast. These allegations were made on the 30th of December 2025. However, Ukraine, first of all, denied these claims. And even Donald Trump, who initially condemned criticized this alleged attack, then later claimed that these allegations were more or less fabricated after having been revealed some evidence by, I believe, the CIA. So I think the attack took place in a sequence of events over the past week, which is quite notable. So it came first, I think the first event which is important here is the summit of the so-called Coalition of the Willing in Paris on the 6th of January. This event took place, was focused on long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. And more crucially, France and the UK signed a letter of intent on outlining plans to deploy peacekeeping forces if a peace deal is reached between Russia and Ukraine. So the strike, the use of the Oreshnik missile is clearly intended as part of Russia, as a part of a strategic messaging effort by Russia to deter Western countries from providing long-term support and political or military support for Ukraine. I mean, the location of the attack is quite notable because it is striking a city which is close to a NATO border first, and it is also intended to show that Russia can strike anywhere in Ukraine, and therefore even in locations where potential peacekeeping force, Franco-British peacekeeping force, could be more or less located. So there was also another event which was last week on the 7th of January. The U.S. confirmed the seizure of a Russian flagship. In the immediate aftermath of this incident, Russia's response was pretty contained. And we had assessed already then that Russia would limit its try to avoid any direct confrontation with the U.S. over this issue, and that instead it would try to respond uh, within Ukraine, and therefore the Oreshnik missile launch was also part of this effort to respond to the U.S. seizure of this vessel. So to sum up, this was clearly intended to signal strength, and especially as there had been a sequence of events to which Russia was responding.
Yeah, that context is really important. So just to recap, then, Russia claims that one of its presidential or Putin's presidential residences was struck. Whether that's true or not exactly sure. Trump has initially condemned it, then switched tack and says that that is false. In response, Russia then strikes very close to the Polish border using a weapon that is capable of delivering a nuclear payload. Let's just move on to the broader context of this war. Can you give us a little recap of, I know it's a tough question. It's been a whole year, but how has the war progressed in 2025?
Yeah, sure. So what we've seen broadly in 2025 is that Russia's territorial gains have accelerated, especially compared to 2024. So just some figures over here. In 2025, Russia was able to conquer around 4,800 square kilometers. In comparison, I mean, in 2024, estimates indicate that Russia was able to take control of around 3,500 square kilometers. So clearly, there's been more gains in 2025. And our assessment is that this was primarily driven by a shift in Russian tactics. Russia increasingly relying on so-called infiltration tactics taking place in urban areas, as well as an improvement in also Russia's battlefield air interdiction campaigns. We've seen, for instance, a clear improvement in Russia's drone strikes along the front line. So this has clearly supported and enabled Russia to increase its gains in 2025. And at the same time, we've seen that there's been a slight decrease in Russia's casualty rates for these reasons and the shift in tactics. That said, first of all, Russia has not achieved any breakthrough in 2025. The pace remains slow, at the current rate of advance, it would take years for Russia to complete the takeover of, for instance, Donetsk Oblast, which is one of its key objectives at this stage in the war. While the pace has been slow, it also shows that Ukraine's operational situation is becoming increasingly more difficult. This is also, happy to touch upon this a little bit later, but this is primarily driven by issues with military recruitment and also broader uncertainty when it comes to Western military equipment provided to Ukraine. So overall, the big picture is that Russia has continued to make gains, but has not achieved any breakthrough in 2025.
Yeah, understood. So still grinding its way through more territory in 2025, no big strategic breakthroughs.
Precisely.
But improved air capabilities specifically, and its infiltration tactics seem to be working out. How is the Ukrainian side doing? We know the peace plan is allegedly being hashed out. Ukraine is consistently facing personnel issues. At the same time, some Western countries, as you said earlier, have come together and secured budget for Ukraine in the long term. How much longer can the Ukrainians hold out at this stage?
So, what we're seeing from the operational perspective when it comes to Ukraine is that, as I said, the front line is not collapsing, but it is facing growing difficulties in sustaining various fronts. So we've seen that Russia was able to make some rapid advances in some areas of the front because, in those areas, Ukrainian defenses were weaker, and Russia was able to clearly exploit this weakness, having also improved its ability to identify these weaknesses across the front line. And as you said, the issue of personnel shortages is clearly one of the main causes over here. But there's quite a lot of uncertainty when it comes to Western aid. But the EU managed in extremis in December to agree to a loan, 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine, which will be delivered from April, I believe. And this loan will definitely help Ukraine to purchase equipment. But there's still a lot of uncertainty on how this will have an immediate impact or not when it comes to Ukraine's operational capabilities. Then there's also the question of U.S. aid, U.S. support. With at this stage, U.S. Military support and even financial support has significantly declined under the mandate of President Donald Trump. However, the U.S. still continues to provide crucial intelligence shares intelligence with the Ukraine, which is essential for Ukraine, especially when conducting strikes or even, for instance, its air defense capabilities in countering Russia's own missile strikes. So overall, what we are going to see is that the situation will remain difficult for Ukraine. But if aid is funneled through to Ukraine, especially European financial aid, will definitely slightly improve Ukraine's defense capabilities. Although there's a lot of question marks regarding aid and for instance, the finance package.
Yeah, thank you. And just sticking on the Ukrainian side for a moment, I wanted to touch on the corruption scandal we saw before the break. And then following that, President Zelensky's conducting a big personnel reshuffle at the highest levels of his government. What do these leadership changes mean, especially in the context of these ongoing peace talks?
So the corruption scandal that took place, was unveiled last year, was clearly the trigger point here for the major cabinet reshuffle. So for context, the end of 2025, Ukraine's anti-corruption bodies, which unveiled a major corruption scheme within the energy sector. This led to Zelensky earlier this year, from the 2nd of January, to conduct arguably the largest cabinet reshuffle since the start of the war. While the changes affected some high-ranking positions within the cabinet, such as the Minister of Defense or Minister of Economy, these changes also heavily affected the intelligence services. For instance, Zelensky appointed the influential head of military intelligence, Kirill Budanov, as the head of the presidential office, thereby replacing Andriy Yermak. At the same time, he's also replaced the head of the SBU, State Security Service, Vasyl Malyuk, who has been also an influential figure, and the SBU under Malyuk had conducted some very prominent operations deep inside Russia, such as the very notorious Operation Spiderweb last year against Russia's aviation assets. This cabinet reshuffle is clearly aimed at restoring domestic trust, but also international trust. For instance, Budanov's appointment clearly fills that goal because Budanov is a highly popular figure, given his war record, and he has strong ties with the U.S. Thereby, his move might be also an effort to improve the longer-term relations with the Trump administration, given that there were some issues over the past year. This is also clearly aimed at the domestic audience. For instance, last year, there were major corruption, major protests against efforts to curtail the broader anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine. And corruption has always been a very sensitive issue within Ukraine's society. And therefore, this is also aimed at restoring some of the public trust in state institutions.
Thanks, Karan. So let's get into this peace plan just a little bit more. I know we're running over, but that's okay. I'm going to roll these questions into one.
Yeah.
How realistic is Zelensky's framework for peace compared to Russian objectives? And then on that, why is control of the Donbass and the, excuse my pronunciation, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, why is that so important to Russia's objectives?
So just for context, Zelensky has recently outlined his 20-point peace plan, which was a revised version of Donald Trump's own 28-point peace plan, outlined at the end of last year. And well, the main issue here is that Zelensky was, of course, pursuing Ukraine's interests, but the peace plan is the majority of the points in this peace plan are basically non-starters for Russia. So, as you mentioned, there's the territorial issue, but also the issue, for instance, of the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. So, when it comes to the territorial issue, Zelensky proposes basically freezing the front line as it is along existing lines. So, basically, is creating a de facto line of contact. This clearly contradicts Russia's long-term goals in terms of territory, that is to achieve the full conquest of the regions it has officially annexed in 2022. So therefore, this is one key reason why Russia would refuse and oppose the peace plan. When it comes to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the Trump administration had previously proposed a joint management of this nuclear power plant between Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. Zelensky's latest peace plan just proposes for just a joint U.S.-Ukrainian management model. In any case, again, over here for the same reason, because Russia had formally annexed Zaporizhia, Russia is going to refuse, or has refused basically this, and will remain opposed to this point in particular. But more broadly, one of the key reasons also of Russia's opposition is that at this stage, it still remains confident that its military efforts will bear fruit in 2026, more broadly. So it is highly unlikely to be committed to any peace talk or achieving any tangible progress when it comes to peace negotiations in 2026.
Yeah, makes sense. So just to be clear, the reason your desk is forecasting that this will not go through is because Russia is looking for complete control of these areas. I'm assuming that's the Donbass and Luhansk. And currently the front line is not behind those regions, if that makes sense. Do I have that right?
Precisely, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's look at the international and the EU angle a little bit more. How might European states react if these Russian strikes continue pushing closer to NATO borders? I mean, we saw in 25 at the end of the year just Russia getting a little more brazen with its drones flying into NATO countries. I believe it was Poland and Estonia. Flight times in their airspace were kind of unprecedented. Do we see a unified response? Is it still quite divided? What are you seeing?
So that's a very good point, and these questions are clearly one of the goals sought after by Russia. I mean, as you mentioned, the drone incursion in Poland that took place in September was one of the most serious violations of, I would say, of NATO territory by Russia. There had been previously drone incursions, but the number was quite significant at that time. So Russia's clearly testing NATO's readiness and how cohesive NATO is, especially European partners, and is trying to exploit tensions within the bloc and what broadly I would say here, what could be perceived as a level of strategic confusion within the EU broadly. So the key issue here is how Europe will manage to, I think, respond to these incursions by also supporting Ukraine as part of an effort to undermine Russia's military capabilities and deter Russia in the longer term. I think that's the key element over here. Overall, it's all about the EU trying to go beyond just the reactive phase and trying to think in terms of long-term deterrence. But of course, there's a lot of question marks on how EU is going to actually be able to do that, especially as it's facing also some tensions with the US on so many topics, but even including on Greenland.
Yeah. So looking forward, and here's the $1 million question for you. Karen. What is your desk forecasting as the most realistic scenario for 2026? Is this escalation, stalemate, negotiated settlement, or continue grinding, slow burn conflict?
That's
What's the forecast?
that's a good question, and currently we believe that the war is going to continue at this rate in 2026. Progress on peace talks is going to be limited for the very reason I mentioned earlier. That is, Russia remains unwilling to compromise on its war goals. It remains really confident that it can achieve its goals militarily if it does not achieve it on the diplomatic level. So ceasefires are possible, but they will remain quite fragile and vulnerable to collapse broadly. I think will be very important to look for is how the EU's loan for Ukraine, which will be delivered from April, how it will improve Ukraine's operational situation. Will Ukraine be able to purchase weaponry, mostly from the US? There are some disagreements amongst EU countries about how Ukraine should use these loans. For instance, I believe over the past 24 hours, I think France said that it wants Ukraine to use it to purchase European weapons. But again, this is just restricting Ukraine's ability, and it will have an impact on Ukraine's operational situation should EU countries impose such a condition on the use of the loan. So overall, yes, the war is going to continue at this rate in 2026.
And what triggers, warnings, indicators will your desk be looking at in the coming months? What could signal a shift in momentum?
I think one key trend we'll be watching is Ukraine's operational situation. So if there's a dramatic deterioration of Ukraine's front line, then leading to rapid Ukraine's Russian gains, that would have a dramatic effect on the course of the war broadly. And this is our worst case scenario, and we constantly update our various scenarios pieces. But this is clearly a very plausible scenario this year, although this remains unlikely. But of course, I mean, that's going to be key issue. And another issue is, of course, the level of damage inflicted to Ukraine as a result of long-range strikes. This is having a dramatic effect. We've seen, like over the past week, how these attacks have clearly escalated the humanitarian situation in Kyiv, in the capital, with some officials calling for, informally, this was not official, but calling for evacuation of residents when they can to other areas. So this is having dramatic effects. And monitoring Ukraine's stockpiles of air defense missiles will be key this year, and indicating how Ukraine is able to defend against Russia's long-range strikes, but also broader Ukraine's defense capabilities against just Russia's invasion.
Awesome. Thank you, Karan. So for our listeners, Karan and his desk are monitoring the situation closely. They release a number of regular and special reports, as well as hosting regular weekly briefings on the situation. So if you're interested in watching this more closely, you can contact us, info@sibylline.co.uk. Karan, thank you very much for taking the time today, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. Really a pleasure. See you soon.
Yeah. And for our listeners, we will see you next time. Thank you.